I've spent 3 years as professional voyeur for a Fortune 500 company, and the hardest part isn't the things I saw on the clock. It's realizing I've become addicted to a life that isn't mine. Being a night shift security guard in a corporate high-rise is a specific kind of sensory deprivation. You exist in the silence that everyone else leaves behind at 5 p.m. Consequently, when you find a spark of heat in that cold, steel building, you gravitate toward it like a moth. For me, that spark was the executive suite on the 42nd floor. In the daylight, the man who owned that office was a titan. He was the kind of guy who looked like he'd never had a hair out of place or a moment of doubt. However, the night shift tells a different story. He started staying late with his assistant. At first, it looked like work. Therefore, I didn't think much of it. But then the body language shifted. And then turned into buts. They weren't just finishing a merger. They were circling each other. I remember the first time I saw it happen. The janitors had finished, and the floor was officially dark. Since I was bored, I panned camera 4B toward his desk. He wasn't sitting. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city. She walked up behind him and didn't say a word. She just put her hand on the small of his back. The air in my security booth suddenly felt like it was disappearing. I should have looked away. That's what the manual says. Nonetheless, I zoomed in. I watched him turn around and press her against the glass. The contrast was insane, the cold, blue lights of the city outside, and the absolute, frantic heat inside that room. I became a junkie for Friday nights. I'd prep for it like it was a movie premiere. I'd dim the lights in the booth, so the only thing glowing was the 16-screen grid. Accordingly, my own life started to disappear. I wasn't just watching a security risk anymore. I was participating in the only way I knew how. One night, it got particularly intense. They were on a mahogany conference table, completely reckless, thinking they were alone in the world. I was watching her head toss back, and his hands gripping the edge of the wood. So I did it. I unzipped. I sat there in the dark, my eyes locked on the 4K feed, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was the most alive I'd felt in years. Yet, it was also the most pathetic. I was pleasuring myself to a silent digital ghost of two people who didn't even know I existed. I was a ghost watching ghosts. The rhythm of my life became tied to theirs. During the day, I'd see them in the lobby. He'd be barking into a phone, and she'd be 2 steps behind him, cold and professional. Otherwise, nobody would ever guess what they did on that table. I'd look at them and feel a sick sense of power, but also a crushing weight of shame. I knew the sound of her breath, even though I'd never heard her speak. Eventually, the guilt started to rot me from the inside out. I wasn't a protector. I was a parasite. Thus, I didn't wait for a scandal or a caught-on-camera moment. I couldn't look at the monitors anymore without seeing my own reflection. A guy in a cheap uniform, sweating in the dark, living a second-hand life. I quit yesterday. I didn't give a 2-week notice. I just left my keys on the desk and walked out while the 42nd floor was still glowing. But the truth is, I still can't sleep. I close my eyes and I still see the city lights reflecting off that window. I'm not a security guard anymore. I'm just a guy who knows too much about people who will never know my name. Man, that is heavy. I think what hits the hardest about this confession isn't even the NSFW stuff. It's that feeling of being a ghost watching ghosts. We've all had those moments where we feel like we're just on the outside looking in, whether it's scrolling through perfect lives on Instagram or, in this guy's case, literally watching a high-stakes romance from a security booth. But there's a real moral gray area here, right? On one hand, he's just doing his job and happened to see something he couldn't unsee. But on the other, the moment he started, participating from the booth, he crossed a line that turned him from a witness into a voyeur. It makes you wonder, if you had the keys to a building like that and you knew nobody was ever going to catch you watching, would you have the strength to turn the monitor off, or would you stay in the dark? I want to hear from you guys on this one. Is the narrator the creep here, or is he just a lonely guy who got caught up in a world that was way more interesting than his own? And to the people working those graveyard shifts right now, what's the weirdest thing you've seen on a security feed? Drop a comment below. I read all of them. And honestly, some of your stories are even wilder than the ones I find on Reddit. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed the tension of this one, and I'll see you in the next confession.